From clothing to cosmetics to the latest trends, women are the largest group of consumers in the economy. According to the Harvard Business Review, they alone represent a growth market larger than China and India combined. Particularly over the course of the last 5 years, there has been rapid growth in high-end luxury fashion brand sales. What is it about these advertisements that sell to the predominantly female consumer? How does mainstream advertising affect the mind of the female in order to induce them into buying these very specific products? To examine the psychological appeal of advertisements, we turn to Siegfried Krakauer's essay entitled "Little Shop Girls Go to the Movies." According to Krakauer, the technique of depicting scenarios and situations that are near impossible to obtain is specifically what appeals to the female consumer. Sensationalist advertisements, just as sensationalist movies, represent the innate wants of society to become part of the upper crust. This phenomenon is not absent in advertisements in our society today. Advertisements illustrate a life one could have, a life that can be obtained through the consumption of material goods. It becomes a way to fulfill society's ever-present desire to live within the daydream. It is the unrealistic portrayal of the high life that appeals to the luxury fashion brand consumer. This type of advertising has a deep psychological effect on the female consumer by conveying isolated glimpses of what their life could be like if they were to buy a certain product. Advertisements for high-end fashion brands idealize the bourgeois lifestyle by portraying it as glamorous, carefree, sophisticated, and without constraint. A key precept of Krakauer's theory is that once one gets a glimpse of the high life, one wants to see it more and more. Luxury fashion brands operate in the same manner. The brands create a never-ending cycle of women wanting to consume more and more as additional products are unveiled. For example, one luxury fashion brand that employs this technique is Burberry. In this ad, we see both models dressed from head to toe in Burberry clothing, complete with accessories: the trench coat, the umbrella that the male model is holding, the hat that the female model is wearing, and the purse that is in her hand. Why buy one item when you can have 4 or 5? You not only need the clothing, but the accessories as well in order to achieve complete fulfillment and entrance into high society. Thus, material purchases become synonymous with happiness.
Art describes myth-making in advertising as a semiological process by which images produce a meaning symbolic of more than the sum of their parts. If we acknowledge film as an art form based on freezing events in a frame, as described in Foyer's article on live TV, we can trace this desire for image presentation to the realm of advertising. Designer clothing ads that target women speak to myths surrounding their agency through poses, settings, and the use of specific models. These ads frequently display women in positions of strong agency and seem to speak to worlds beyond the grip of our own patriarchal culture, reaching for both real and unreal places as settings upon which women become their full potential. Through some brands' inclusion of already famous individuals like Beyoncé, Jennifer Lopez, Lady Gaga, Kendall Jenner, Blake Lively, and so on, these brands are able to convey their signified messages in a coded way. Through their portrayal of these powerful women, the clothes being worn come to symbolize the ultimate agency as shown by the power poses of models and clothing-centric photography.
In contemporary advertising, women are affected by the images they see on a daily basis. These ads perpetuate common myths about the life a woman should want for herself. When high-end clothing companies show hypersexualized images of women and use these images to sell high-end products, what effect does this have on the psyche of the female consumer? A woman of worth must not only be atypically thin, fair-skinned, and incredibly beautiful, but also carry a Fendi bag. The unlikely becomes the unattainable. Laura Mulvey, in her essay, Visual Pleasure and Narrative Cinema, also talks about this sense of desirability through the concept of the male gaze. She describes the voyeuristic nature of the portrayal of women in cinema and how the male gaze perpetuates the idea that women in film are most valued for their to-be-looked-atness, disregarding all other positive qualities they may possess. Women as the sexual objects of white, heterosexual male spectators remains as a dominant ideology because there is a dominance of images through the perspective of the male viewer. Mulvey explains that there is a psychological fear of emasculation within this perspective, called castration anxiety, that maintains the influence of the male gaze in popular mass media. However, an interesting characteristic of contemporary luxury brands is their apparent movement away from the concept of the male gaze. Female models in these ads are becoming seen more frequently as the dominant figure of the image. This shift in power has an effect upon those consuming these images and these products. Although there are still countless advertisements perpetuating the male gaze and the daydream of society through the portrayal of women in sexual, vulnerable, and one-dimensional ways, luxury advertising of today has some of the most apparent examples of a transition away from a world of female objectification and inferiority. After careful examination, it is clear that high-end luxury fashion brands employ a wide variety of techniques in order to reach female consumers. These high-end ads create an unfulfilling cycle of empty promises in which women buy products without ever achieving the lifestyle that these brands convey. Each time, though, designer brands manage to convince the female consumer that one more product will be able to bring them closer to their desires. These ads simply trap women in a never-ending cycle of consumerism that will undoubtedly continue in the future.